Hi lovelies, welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be learning how to make this beautiful trendy underbust crop top with puffy sleeves. I used 2 yards of light crepe fabric to make this. If you're on a bigger size, you can make use of 2.5 yards. I'm going to show you the pattern drafting as well as the sewing of this blouse, and as usual it's going to be very informative, straightforward and beginner friendly. So if you'd like to learn how to make this, keep watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and without wasting much time, let's jump right into it. Right here is my basic bodies, and I've gone ahead to mark out my vertical measurements, and right here I have my shoulder to chest line, shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, and the half length that I am using is 20 inches. I went ahead to add 1 inch underneath it, and that will serve as sewing allowance. Now the neck width that I am using is 3.5 inch. I went ahead to mark that down. For the neck depth, I'll be making use of 1.5 inch. I'll then go ahead and connect my lines with a curve. I'll also create a shoulder slant, and from this shoulder line here I'm going to drop it by 1 inch and create a slant to meet the neck width like so. Next thing, now I'll be inserting my horizontal measurements, and to do that, on this chest line right here I'll go ahead and insert my bust divided by 4 plus 1 inch. So my bust divided by 4 is 9.8 plus 1 inch sewing allowance, that is 10.8, and I'll go ahead and mark that down. Going over to the length of this blouse, I'll be marking my waist measurement divided by 4, and that is 8.25 plus 1 inch sewing allowance, that is 9.25. I'll go ahead and mark that down. I'll just go ahead and label down all my lines so you can understand properly what I'm doing. So right here is my chest line, my bust point, my under bust, half length, and then this last line right here I'll label it AL, which means allowance. I'll go ahead and connect my dots from the bust point all the way to the allowance point like so. After doing that, I'm basically done, so I'll just go ahead and cut out this pattern. Moving forward, I've gone ahead to introduce a fresh pattern paper which I'll be using to draft out the front pattern. I'll then place the back pattern which we just drafted on top of it, and I'll be leaving some allowance along this fold line like so. So now I'm just going to cut everything off exactly the same as the back, because it's basically going to be the same thing except for the part where we're going to add a button in the front of our blouse. You can see the way I'm trimming this off. I just stopped along this shoulder line because that's where I'm going to be altering it, okay? So right now I'm just going ahead to transfer all my lines because we'll be needing those lines while drafting this front pattern as well. So just take your time and transfer all your lines. After I'm done, I'll go ahead and bring back the back piece, and I'll be aligning it at the sides like this, okay? And then from here I'll be marking the button allowance. Looking at this picture, you will see that the button started from the underbust. So from this underbust point, right from that fold of the back piece, I'll be marking out 1.5 inch down to the hem of our top like this. Next thing, I'll come to this neckline and I'll be marking this point here, which is our neck width. And on the underbust, just at the center back, I'll also make a point here, and then I'll connect them with a slant like this. By the side here, I'll also drop the underbust by 1 inch, and I'll draw a line across to meet that point like this. If you notice, I connected my slant to meet that point just before the button allowance. That's because I'm going to be adding a collar, just like you see in the picture. This top is going to have a collar, so at that remaining point where the button allowance ends, I'm going to be adding a collar around that side. So now I'm basically separating it at this point because I'll be slashing the up part. I'll be slashing and spreading so as to create the guard as you see in this picture. The down part is going to be left plain. So if you notice, the back shoulder of this top elongates towards the front. So what I'm going to do is this: I am going to cut off 2 inches from this front piece, and I'm going to transfer it to the back piece so that by the time you sew it together, the back is going to protrude towards the front. You can see the way I am attaching this thing. Like, after cutting it, I turned it upside down and aligned both shoulders together. So I'm just basically trying to indicate the shoulder point so that you understand properly what I'm trying to do. So these are my shoulder points, and when I cut it from the front, I'm going to turn it to the opposite side, and then I'm going to align it on the shoulder like you see me do here. So by the time I place this like this, you can see that the back shoulder is moving towards the front, so it looks exactly like what it is in the picture. Okay, I'll go ahead and indicate that this back piece is going to be cut on fold along this side, and for the front piece I'll be cutting 2 for both sides, and this down yoke I'll cut 4 pieces because I'm going to be lining it with the same fabric. So these are my patterns laid out. I'll just go ahead and cut on my main fabric. So right here is the fabric I'll be using to cut out this blouse, and I'll first of all start with the back piece. And to cut that, I'm going to go ahead and fold my fabric into 2, and then I'll place my cut back piece on top of it. And this part that we indicated fold on the back piece right here, I'm going to be aligning it along the folded side of my fabric like this. Okay, and then after placing this, I'm just go ahead and cut out. So while cutting, don't forget to add your 1/2 inch joining allowance along that shoulder point. Okay, so after I'm done cutting, this is what it looks like. By the time I open this up, you can see that we have a full back piece. Now for the front, I also went ahead and folded my fabric into 2 so that I can cut 2 different sides for the left and the right side of my blouse. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to divide these points because I'll be slashing and spreading them on this fabric. So I'll do that also along this underbust point, and then I'll be drawing a line across those points before going ahead to number them down. So now while cutting through, I actually made a mistake. That number 5 is not supposed to be there because there's not going to be any slash along that armhole. The armhole is meant to stay as it is. Before cutting on my fabric, I'm going ahead to close up that point so it's not going to be there. Okay, now I'm just going ahead to distribute the slashed pieces on top of my fabric, and I'll be leaving about 1 inch allowance in between each of the pieces. Okay, so I'm just cross-checking to make sure that I have 1 inch in between each piece. So to know that you're actually placing your pieces correctly, just look at those lines, make sure that they are on a straight line. That's how to know that you are actually placing your pieces in the correct way. Make sure that those lines align, they are on a straight line. Okay, so just place it nicely, and then you can cut out, leaving 1/2 inch and joining allowance along the underbust point and also around the shoulders. For this number 4 and 5, I went ahead to close it up because I will not be needing a slash along that point. The armhole is going to remain the same because I'm going to be aligning it to the back piece and sewing together. Okay, so after aligning this point, I'll just go ahead and cut it out. Now I'm done cutting. When I take this away, you can see that we have a very wide piece. So I'll just open this up, place it here, and then I'll be gathering along these sides. Okay, so that is the aim of the slash and spread. And now going over to cut the down part of my front piece, I went ahead and folded my fabric into 4, just like we indicated here that we'll be cutting 4 pieces, and that's because we're going to be using the same fabric to line it. You can notice that I actually left 1/2 inch joining allowance along the top of that my underbust. That is to enable us to join this to the upper part of the blouse, so you should ensure to leave that there. After cutting out my pieces, I also went ahead and cut out lining pieces for all of them. So if your fabric is thick enough, you can just leave it like that, but for me, my fabric is very light, so I went ahead to cut out linings for them. I also cut this collar here, which I'll be using to sew all around the neckline. I cut it on fold, and I went ahead to iron hairstay here just to give it solidity. I made sure to cut it so long so that it can wrap all around the neckline, all down to the underbust. Okay, So here is my back piece. I also cut a lining piece for it. My fabric wasn't enough to do that, so I went ahead and cut with a black lining. So now moving over to joining my pieces, I went ahead to place my fabric right sides facing each other, and I'm going to be aligning it along the side and the armhole. You can see that our back shoulder elongates towards the front. So now I'm just basically going to be gathering this front piece just to fit into that back shoulder. Okay, so I'll take this over to my machine and do it and show you what it looks like. Just like we did for the main fabric, I'm also going to do the same thing for the lining. I'm going to bring over my front lining piece and I'm going to align it along the shoulder point. Okay, now after gathering and joining, this is what it looks like. You can see it looks so nice. I went ahead to do it for both the main fabric and the lining piece. So now moving forward, I'm going to be joining both the lining and the main fabric together so that they can both become one piece, so to enable me join the collar nicely. So to do that, I'm going to place my main fabric like this, just the wrong side upwards, and I'm going to place the lining piece on top of it. So basically I'm placing wrong sides facing each other, and then after doing that, I'm going to be sewing all around the neckline, the armhole, the sides, and then for this part down here, I'm going to be turning it on the inside because I want the outside to have a clean finish, because that's going to basically be the hem of the top. Now for the down part of the front piece, I went ahead to iron hairstay on it. Remember that we cut 4 pieces, so I'm going to bring out 2 and then place it like this, and I'm going to be sewing along the hem of this top, that is the down part of the blouse, and along the button allowance. After sewing down, this is what I have. You can see that I have both my actual fabric and my lining in one piece. Now for the down part of my front piece, I went ahead to join along this button allowance and also along the hem of the blouse, and then I turned it inside out neatly. But before I join that to the top, I'm going to first of all attach the collar to the blouse. So to do that, I'm going to place this cut collar along the right side of my blouse, and I'm going to be pinning it from one underbust all around through the neck to the other underbust. Okay, after I'm done pinning, this is what it looks like. I'll take this over to the machine and I'm going to sew all around the pinned points. So I'm just going to cut off this excess, making sure that I have this part here all on the same line. So after I'm done sewing down everything, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to align this under part here. I'll open it up and align it to the collar, just like what you see me do here. And then before I actually sew, I'll make sure that I have this upper part gathered up so that everything can fit into the under part of the blouse. Okay, I've gone ahead to attach my collar using the sewing machine, and you can see how nice this was. The part where we pinned, I've sewn everything down nicely and I've weaved it out nicely. Also for this down part right here, I went ahead to gather it up, and while gathering up, you should have it in mind that it has to be the same length with the down part, so that, because you know we're going to be attaching those 2 points together, so make sure that they are both the same length. So if you notice, I did not start my gathers from the beginning of the collar. I gave in some space, about 2 to 3 inches, before starting my gathers all through to the side of my blouse. So if you want to, you can do the same. If you don't want, you can start your gathers all the way from the collar. It does not really matter. Now watch carefully how I'm going to be attaching this. I'll first of all open up this part here, and on that line there, I'll be aligning it to the collar of my top like this, and then I'll basically just pin down before taking it over to the machine to sew. So what I'm doing is this: I have the top part of my blouse in between the down part like this. Okay, so I'll pin all the way to the side of my blouse. So after I'm done, I'll just show you what it's going to look like. After I'm done, I will just bring it over to the right side, and this is how it should look when you're done sewing. You can see that on the inside there is no seam allowance showing, no stitches. It's basically concealed inside the wrong side of this blouse. Next thing, now I'll turn it over and I'll be sewing the sides of the blouse. And you remember, while drafting this blouse, we left 1 inch for sewing allowance, so that is what I'm going to be stitching down with. So next thing, now we're going to be drafting the sleeve for this blouse, and to do that I'll go ahead and measure around what I have on the armhole. This is to enable us know how wide we're going to fold the fabric to cut the sleeve. So whatever you get, you're going to fold your fabric by 2 and add some allowances, because we are going to be having some gathers around the shoulder point. Okay, so here I'm going to be cutting 2 sleeves at the same time. So what I did is I went ahead to fold my fabric into 4 so that I can have 2 sleeves at once. Next thing, now I'll be marking the length for this sleeve, and the actual length for my client is 23 inches, but I'm going to be adding 5 inches to that because I will be using ½ inch to join to the blouse, and the down part I'll be using about 1½ inch to fold for the elastic casing, and also the remaining inches is basically going to create the puff you see in this picture. So after marking that down, I'm going to come down by 4 inches and I'm going to be creating the sleeve cap height. And then I'll draw a curve to meet the top like this, and here I have my sleeve drafted out. So for the width of this sleeve, that is how wide the sleeve is going to be. I'm basically using the maximum length of my fabric. So I basically just folded my fabric into 4. I'm not actually calculating, but if you want to know, here I have about 14 inches, and that's very okay. Between 14 and 15 works fine. Okay, so after I'm done, I'll just go ahead and notch this middle part here because I'll be needing that while joining on the blouse. So this is what my sleeve looks like. I have 2 separate pieces. Okay, this part right here, I'm going to be creating an elastic casing, and to do that I'll first of all fold first by 0.25 of an inch, and then fold again by 3/4 of an inch, and then along the side I'll be sewing down from the wrist all through to the end of our armhole. So guys, I'm so sorry, I actually recorded the joining of this sleeve, but then I couldn't find it on my phone anymore, so I'm just basically going to explain how I did it. So to get the middle of your sleeve on the blouse, you're just going to align that armhole. Okay, so once your armholes are aligned, you are just going to find the other edge and notch it, and that will be the middle point of the shoulder on the blouse. Then you're going to align that notch point of the blouse to the notch point of the sleeve, and you're going to sew all around, and the excess you have, you're going to pleat it to fit into the armhole. So once you are done, this is what the blouse looks like. You can see everything looks so nice. I went ahead to add an elastic to the wrist of this blouse, and I went ahead to weave everything nice and clean. On this part here, we're going to be creating a buttonhole, and we'll be adding buttons along this point. So now we've come to the end of this tutorial. If you find this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, don't forget to leave it in the comment section. And also, if you have any other tutorial you would like me to work on, please suggest it down in the comments and I'll make sure to check it out. So see you in my next video. Bye.